Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers identification laws, passengers of motor vehicles, and officer conduct, and is brought to us by Anthony and Amanda's channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. On March 28, 2019, 29-year-old Sarah Mills and 20-year-old Anthony Baylog were driving to a car dealership when they were stopped by Corporal Michael Miller of the Henry County Sheriff's Office in Abbeville, Alabama. Mrs. Mills and Mr. Baylog are originally from Florida, but had recently moved to the Henry County area.
Hey, what's up? Yes.
Hey, how you doing?
Very good, sir. That's the registration. Why'd you pull me?
Ma'am?
Why'd you pull me?
For speed?
You had your radar out?
Of course.
Okay. I was just asking. I don't know. Some guys don't radar, they just pace. But you couldn't have pace because you're going opposite from me.
Is this your vehicle, Miss Mills?
Yes, of course.
And you have your registration with you that right there?
Actually, yep. Hold that out first.
All right. Where y'all heading to today?
I'm going to go check out a delership, trying to get a new vehicle. This one's about to croak on me.
Okay, no weapons or anything like that?
What?
Is there?
No.
Okay. So do you have your ID on you?
Yeah.
Can I have yours, please, too?
Is that needed?
Yes, sir.
Why do you need his?
Yeah, what do
I
you...
just want to know who I'm dealing with.
Well, he's just a passenger.
Yeah,
He
I'm
doesn't
just a
have
passenger,
license.
so...
Do you have any
He
kind of
doesn't
ID on you?
drive.
No, it's not required of me, so...
Sir?
It's not required of me right now, so I don't need to provide that. I'm not the one driving, so...
Yeah, I was speeding.
Passengers of detained motor vehicles are not required to present their identification unless an officer has acquired reasonable suspicion that they were involved in criminal activity. I have covered the topic of passenger identification in a previous episode, which I will link in the info card above. In an interview with the Dothan Eagle, Henry County Sheriff Will Maddox claimed that Corporal Miller detected the odor of marijuana emanating from Mrs. Mills's vehicle, which would in fact satisfy the reasonable suspicion needed to order Mr. Baylog to identify himself. Mrs. Mills and Mr. Baylog have since refuted the officer's claims, and Officer Miller never mentions the odor of marijuana at any point during the interaction. All that said, officers are not required to state their reasoning for demanding identification, and are under no legal obligation to tell citizens that they have detected the odor of marijuana.
Not for the temp. How you
I'm
doing?
having a hard time understanding what's going on here.
Oh,
I'm asking you to identify yourself to me, okay?
Yeah.
And you are a passenger in this vehicle.
Correct.
And I want to know who you are so I know who I'm dealing with.
Okay.
Okay? When you're issued a license, even in Florida, it's really property of the state of Florida.
Right. He
And your
doesn't have a
license.
he don't have a license.
Do you have any kind of ID to prove to me who you
Yeah,
are? sir?
no, not on me right now.
Not on you.
So,
Do you have a
No,
Florida
he's
ID?
driving.
no,
No, he
not
doesn't
on me
have a
right now,
license.
No, I mean, what?
Yeah, not on me right now.
But you do have one issued from Florida, right?
Yeah, but it's not on me right
Okay, what is your first name, please?
now. I don't think I should be providing that. I don't think I need to. I'm not the one under question here. I'm not the one behind the wheel, so...
Okay.
Yeah.
Step out of the vehicle, please.
Yeah, shit.
Did he do something?
Am I being detained?
Well, what are we being
Right now, I'm
detained
getting an
for?
investigation. Yeah, step out of the vehicle.
An investigation on what?
I'm talking with him. I've already told you why I stopped you. Step out of the
Yeah, but you didn't stop him. Hold on, I got you. I got it.
And what's the investigation?
Step out of the vehicle, sir. Open the door, step out.
If I'm not
Because you're
under...
refusing to cooperate and answer my questions, okay? Now,
That's
I
not
know where
against
this is
the law.
going because I've done this, all right? But you are part of the vehicle, and I stopped her for speeding, and I like to know who you are. And you're giving me this deal. Well, I don't think I have to identify you.
Well, no, we don't
I'm
think we
talking to him.
know.
Stand still, okay?
Yeah,
So-
I know I don't have to provide my identification.
You don't?
I
No,
don't.
sir.
You should.
No, I'm not a part of this.
Okay,
I'm not
well,
driving.
here's the
so-
thing. But you are a passenger in the vehicle, okay?
So if I had my
am
kids, would they
conducting-
have to
I am-
ID too?
I needed to, yes.
But my children are
But they're not
children.
here, so that's really a mute point. So now you can either cooperate, but the more that you refuse to answer my questions or tell me who you are, pending the investigation, now you're obstructing my investigation.
But there's no investigation.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
there is.
No.
That's your vehicle.
Yeah,
So
but you could have
you
been
have
handled
the-
your business.
I am
I'm not
handling my
interfering.
business. You're a part of it. Yes, you are.
Do you have
I'm
a
not interfering.
supervisor we could
I
speak
do. I
to?
am a supervisor.
Officers are well within their authority to order a passenger into or out of a detained vehicle. The 1977 Supreme Court case of Pennsylvania versus Mims granted officers the authority to control the movement of drivers they have detained. And in the 1997 Supreme Court case of Maryland versus Wilson, the court extended that authority to also include passengers of detained vehicles. Alabama Code 13A-10-2 states that a person commits the crime of obstructing governmental operations if, by means of intimidation, physical force, or interference, or by any other independently unlawful act, he intentionally obstructs, impairs, or hinders the administration of law or other governmental function, or intentionally prevents a public servant from performing a governmental function. Mr. Baylogs' refusal to obey Corporal Miller's commands would likely constitute a violation of this code, because he was lawfully ordered to exit the vehicle and willfully declined to do so. If Corporal Miller did in fact detect the odor of marijuana, Mr. Baylog could potentially be charged under Code 13A-10-2 for refusing to provide identification.
So, again, you can identify yourself to me and we can move along.
Could you identify yourself? You don't have a
Corporal
badge.
Miller, I already have.
What's your
Badge is right
number?
here.
What's your badge number?
You guys not have badge numbers
I
here?
have badge number. So,
Could you
again,
provide your badge number?
I just did. I told you who I am.
And your badge number?
You don't need it. That is
I do
impertinent.
need that.
Well,
I do
sir,
need
this
that.
is just a traffic stop,
do
so
need
you
that.
really
So
just
now I'm
need
gonna
my
ask you again,
license.
Step out of the vehicle.
I'd like to ask for your badge number again. And you have not
I
provided
have
that yet.
introduced myself
You
to you
are
and I'm a
legally
uniform.
supposed to provide your badge number
No,
and
I'm
name.
not.
Yes,
Well,
you are.
legally, if you're in
Identify.
uniform, you have to.
Contrary to popular belief, officers are under no legal obligation to identify themselves to members of the public. Most departments draft policies which require their officers to identify themselves upon request. However, those policies are not based on any legal standard or case law. Furthermore, officers who violate those policies are not always subject to reprimands, and the department may choose whether to administer disciplinary action or not. The scope and stringency of these policies vary wildly from department to department, and whether or not a department chooses to enforce those policies varies just as drastically. Most departmental policies can be located on the department's website, but as Mr. Baylog and Mrs. Mills discover later in this episode, that is not always the case for rural departments.
3712. All right, step out of the vehicle again, or I'm going to take you out of the vehicle.
As
okay?
soon as you provide
No,
me
you
with your
can't.
name and badge
You
number.
can't.
3712.
If you
Come
grab
on.
me, that's an
30
assault. You
no,
understand
You
that?
can't assault him
You
because he
understand
doesn't
that's
want to
assault
give
if
his
you pull me out of the
information.
vehicle.
You're refusing to
You
get out
have
of the
yet
vehicle.
to
Well, he
provide.
shouldn't
Three
have to.
times. I've
This
asked you
is a
3
You have
traffic
yet to
stop,
provide
sir.
your name and
This-
badge number.
if
How do I
we're-
know who you are? If you haven't
Hold on.
provided your name and badge
If we're
number.
being detained for something, now I am because I was
You
speeding.
can't do that. You
Do
can't-
not touch him.
you
Please
cannot
do not
that's
assault him.
If you grab me, that's assault.
Corporal Miller extracts Mr. Baylog from the vehicle, places him into handcuffs, and puts him in the back of his patrol car. He then orders Mrs. Mills to stand near her vehicle, but she refuses to comply several times. Once backup arrives on the scene, Mrs. Mills continues to disobey the commands of the officers, and is eventually arrested and taken to jail along with Mr. Baylog. Mrs. Mills was charged with obstructing government operations, resisting arrest, and speeding, and Mr. Baylog was charged with obstructing government operations and criminal mischief. No drugs were found in the vehicle or in Mr. Baylog or Mrs. Mills' possession, and their vehicle was towed. The two were released from jail 3 days later and were unable to locate their impounded vehicle. Nearly 3 weeks after the incident, Mr. Baylog and Mrs. Mills went to the sheriff's office to inquire about where their vehicle was being stored and whether or not they were able to retrieve their personal belongings they had left in the vehicle. By then, the video of their encounter had circulated the community, and the staff at the sheriff's office refused to tell them where their vehicle was being stored and insisted that they must speak with Sheriff Maddox. 5 days later, the two were able to meet with Sheriff Maddox, who initially refused to allow them to access their vehicle, but eventually allowed the two to gather their belongings with a police escort. The sheriff also made several questionable statements during the meeting.
I was told Friday that there was a policy pertaining to getting personal items out of your vehicle, so I was just trying to get a copy of that. And
We
then,
don't give copies of our policies out.
okay, so is there an actual policy?
We've got policies, but it's mostly up to me. What do you want?
Well, we
I
had
mean,
questions
I'm
that
not gonna
were
sit here
new
and
to.
explain
So.
the complete operation of the sheriff's office to y'all.
If
Ask
we
me
have
a
the
question.
questions pertaining to it, I would hope that
Pertaining
you
to what?
would. We're citizens of Abbeville. So.
But
Well, our attorney's only for our criminal case. Once our criminal case is closed, we don't have attorneys. So as citizens, if we have questions, who do we talk to?
Whoever you want to ask the question to, I guess.
In the description of the video of the meeting with Sheriff Maddox, Mr. Baylog and Mrs. Mills claim that upon arriving to work 2 days after their meeting, the two were met with 6 police officers waiting outside of their workplace with the human resources manager and were fired from their job. Following the encounter, the two started a GoFundMe in order to obtain legal representation against the sheriff's office, but the fund was deactivated after only receiving $30 in donations. It is unclear whether Mr. Baylog or Mrs. Mills filed a formal lawsuit, but it appears as though Mr. Baylog has since moved out of Abbeville. Overall, Corporal Miller and the Henry County Sheriff's Office get an F. Because although much of their conduct was legal, Corporal Miller made no effort to de-escalate the encounter, failed to offer a legitimate reason for requesting Mr. Baylog's identification, and Sheriff Maddox's hostile and accusatory demeanor when meeting with Mr. Baylog and Mrs. Mills was patently unprofessional. Much of the validity of Corporal Miller's conduct during this interaction hinges on the scent of marijuana, and it is extremely difficult to dispute the odor of marijuana inside a courtroom. If Corporal Miller did in fact smell marijuana, it is highly suspicious that he did not mention that to Mr. Baylog or Mrs. Mills. If the corporal had taken time to explain that he had detected the smell, then he could have established some kind of reasoning to his actions and shifted the dynamic of the interaction. The most concerning element of this interaction is the conduct of Sheriff Maddox and the ensuing fallout after the encounter. The head of any law enforcement organization should offer members of their community an opportunity to create a productive dialogue and a means to voice their concerns without fear of retaliation. Sheriff Maddox offered no legitimate explanation to Mr. Baylog or Mrs. Mills about his officer's conduct, and maintained an openly hostile demeanor throughout their meeting. If Mr. Baylog and Mrs. Mills' claims about the officers contacting their job and subsequently being fired, then there is no doubt that the Henry County Sheriff's Office is highly corrupt and engaged in illegal activity. Mr. Baylog and Mrs. Mills also get an F for displaying a fundamental misunderstanding of several laws, disobeying a lawful command, and conducting themselves in a way that will only serve to incriminate them inside a courtroom. Much of Mr. Baylog and Mrs. Mills' legal knowledge was a hit and miss, and their emotionally distraught candor contributed to the escalation of the encounter. Just as a surface-level understanding of the law has the potential to aid citizens during a police interaction, it can also harm citizens if it is not wielded correctly. Passionately defending misconceptions about the laws regarding police conduct often results in a false sense of injustice, and generally leads to an arrest. It is extremely important to ensure that your assertions about the law are indisputable, or else you risk being arrested and damaging your chances of finding justice inside the courtroom. Much of Mrs. Mills' irrational conduct was edited out of this video because it was not relevant to the content of this episode. But as I have mentioned in many episodes of ATA, it is vitally important to maintain your emotional stability during police encounters. And Mrs. Mills' conduct was uncalled for and certainly ruined her chances of finding an attorney to represent her. Although Mr. Baylog and Mrs. Mills may very well have been victims of police misconduct and retaliation, their chances of finding justice were all but destroyed by their lack of legal knowledge and emotionally charged conduct. Let us know if there is an interaction or legal topic you would like us to discuss in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more police interaction content.